After Oprah and Netflix, the world was left wondering what more Harry could possibly reveal. Yet in Spare, his memoir, he delivered even more. More blows, more revelations, and a deeper dive into his relationship with his brother, Prince William. The impact was immediate and intense. Harry's words reverberated through the royal family like an earthquake. It wasn't just a family scandal anymore, it was a public reckoning. A family drama laid bare for the world to witness. The palace was stunned. The royal residences were left in a stunned silence, each member grappling with the fallout. The sense of shock was almost palpable. It was as if the very foundation of the monarchy had been shaken. For Harry, Spare wasn't just a recounting of events, it was a cathartic release, a chance to unburden himself of years of pent up frustration. It wasn't only about family conflict, it was about the deep isolation he felt as a member of the royal family. The weight of being the spare, second in line, always in the shadow of his older brother, the heir to the throne, had taken a psychological toll on him that he could no longer keep silent. Harry had spent his life in the spotlight, but he had also spent his life in a cage, bound by duty, by tradition, and by the constant expectation to perform. The public had always seen the royal family as a cohesive unit, but Harry's memoir exposed the cracks in that facade. It wasn't just the monarchy that was under scrutiny. It was a deeply human story about a young man trying to carve out an identity for himself in a system that seemed designed to suppress individuality. Spare didn't just scratch the surface of Harry's grievances, it tore open the wounds, revealing everything. And while much of what Harry shared was already known in whispers, the tense relationship with William, the struggles with the media, it was the level of personal detail that left the world reeling. The most shocking of all was Harry's revelation that his brother William had physically attacked him. It wasn't just a heated argument, it was violence. Harry described the scene vividly. William, seething with anger, grabbing him by the collar, throwing him to the ground, and Harry crashing onto a dog bowl, breaking it. The argument had begun over Meghan, over her treatment of the staff at Kensington Palace, but what followed was a confrontation that spiraled out of control. It was a moment of raw emotion and physicality that no one had seen coming. The notion that two brothers, bound by blood and shared history, could come to such a violent clash felt unimaginable. The image of them tearing at each other in the kitchen of Nottingham Cottage, both brothers caught in the weight of their own pain and frustration, left the world in disbelief. This was no ordinary family dispute. It was a clash that spoke of years of unresolved tension. Harry's words, harsh and unrelenting, painted a picture of two men who had been pushed to the brink by years of competing expectations, jealousy, and a sense of emotional neglect. But this was more than a simple sibling rivalry. It was a manifestation of the pressures they had each faced, of a brotherhood strained to the breaking point by duty, media scrutiny, and a deep sense of loss. And that wasn't even the worst of it. What followed was a steady stream of intimate conversations between Harry and his family. Conversations that were never meant for public ears, that should have remained private. It felt as though Harry had pulled back the curtain on the royal family's deepest secrets, airing their dirty laundry for all to see. The vulnerability in those words made it clear that Harry was not simply fighting with his family. He was struggling to come to terms with his own identity, his place within a system that seemed to both demand and destroy him. The monarchy, with all its pomp and ceremony, had stripped him of the ability to express his true self. Every action, every word had been measured, calculated, controlled, and now, finally, he was unleashing the truth, even if it meant fracturing his relationship with those he loved most. The anger and hurt were not just about what was revealed, but how it was revealed. Harry had crossed a line that many thought he wouldn't or couldn't cross. He exposed personal conversations, some of them incredibly painful, like the one he shared about the aftermath of Prince Philip's funeral. In those moments, Harry's actions felt like a betrayal of the trust that had existed between him and his family. For many, it wasn't just about the content of the revelations, but the fact that they had been shared at all. These were moments that had been meant for family, for the quiet, unspoken bonds between siblings and parents. To make them public was to destroy the privacy that had always been sacred, not just to the royal family, but to the very essence of what it meant to be family. For years, William had worked tirelessly to protect the family's privacy, to shield them from the endless leaks and rumors that plagued their lives. He understood more than anyone that the royal family's image was essential to their survival, to the future of the monarchy. Any hint of discord, any public display of infighting, could lead to irreparable damage. But Harry, in his memoir, had chosen to take that very image, that carefully crafted illusion of unity, and shatter it. His words pierced the public, and William, as future king, was left helpless. In the royal family, there are few outlets for self-expression, and even fewer for defense. William had no platform, no way to publicly answer back. He had no choice but to endure the blows in silence. The frustration, the anger, must have been unbearable. To have your own brother air your most private grievances, knowing you cannot respond, that's a kind of isolation few can truly understand. And yet, it wasn't just the revelations about William that caused such a rift, it was also Harry's portrayal of Kate. In Spare, she was cast in a light that felt cold, distant, and somewhat aloof. Harry's depiction of her as formal and detached, particularly in relation to Meghan, was like a sharp jab at the heart of the family. William, who had always been fiercely protective of Kate, would have found this portrayal particularly difficult to swallow. She wasn't just his wife, she was the mother of his children, the woman who had stood by him through all the trials of public life. To see her painted in such an unflattering light would have stung deeply. It wasn't just a personal attack on Kate, it was an attack on everything William held dear. But it didn't stop there. Harry also took aim at the very institution of the monarchy, at royal marriages, and at the sacrifices made by those who marry into the family. In Spare, he suggested that, unlike Meghan, the other royal women had been forced to marry for duty, not for love. He spoke of the pressure to conform, to choose duty over personal happiness. This too was a painful hit for William. He had witnessed firsthand how hard it had been for his mother, Princess Diana, and later for Kate, who had faced relentless media scrutiny, much like Meghan. For Harry to suggest that Meghan was the first to endure such hardships was a misrepresentation of history. It wasn't just the royal women who had been tested by the pressures of the public eye. All of them had, but the most hurtful moment of all was when Harry turned his anger toward Camilla. For William, this was a red line. You could criticize him, you could criticize the monarchy, but attacking his wife, or revealing deeply personal moments between her and Meghan, was a line that could never be crossed. This was not just a critique of Kate, it was a betrayal of their shared family bonds. The stories Harry told about Kate, the private conversations he revealed, were a violation of something sacred. For William, the loyalty to his wife, the woman he loved and trusted, was unshakable. To see that loyalty questioned in public, to have it undermined so openly, would have felt like the deepest betrayal. As the fallout from Spare continued, there was a growing sense that Harry's version of events was the only one being heard. He had been given the platform to tell his side of the story, but what about William's side? What about the royal family's perspective? The public had been exposed to Harry's narrative, but the royal family had no such platform. They were silenced, forced to endure the accusations without the ability to respond. It was a one-sided battle, and it left William, and the rest of the family, in a position of constant painful silence. For the royal family, silence had always been the strategy. When these kinds of public disputes arise, there's no going back. Once the floodgates are opened, there's no closing them again. The family had learned long ago that the best course of action was to remain calm, to remain silent, and to let the storm pass. But that silence came at a cost. It was a cost that William had to bear in ways few could understand. He had to endure the pain, the frustration, without the catharsis of a response. In the years since their mother's death, the relationship between Harry, William, and their father, King Charles, had always been complicated. But as Charles stepped into his role as king, the dynamics within the family began to shift in ways that would be hard to mend. Harry, now separated from his family, was left to grapple with the truth of his own feelings, feelings that had been buried for years. The bonds that had once been strong between the three of them had weakened. Harry himself acknowledged that he didn't know how much time his father had left. And yet, in this critical moment, there was no closeness, no reunion of the family. The damage had been done, and the chasm between them seemed wider than ever. What was once a close-knit trio, a family bound by shared grief and mutual understanding, had become a broken group, divided by years of pain, misunderstanding, and betrayal. The royal family, so often viewed as a symbol of unity and strength, had been exposed for its fragility, its human imperfections. And at the heart of it all was the relationship between Harry and William, two brothers who had once been inseparable, whose bond had been shattered by rivalry, resentment, and ultimately the weight of their own personal demons. The title of Harry's memoir, Spare, said it all. It was a life spent in the shadow of his brother, constantly feeling overlooked, constantly struggling with the label of the spare. The jealousy, the resentment, the deep emotional wounds Harry had carried for years came pouring out in those pages, unfiltered and raw. What Harry had once believed to be a bond between brothers, an unbreakable tie, had fractured beyond repair, and what remained was a painful reminder of a family that had lost its way. The relationship that once seemed unbreakable, built on a shared history of grief, love, and duty, had now splintered into irreparable pieces. The weight of that loss is something only they can truly understand, a broken bond that no public apology or explanation can heal. The story of Harry and William, of the royal family, is a story of love lost and the devastating cost of silence, of expectation, and of the very system that was meant to hold them together.